Welcome to the Strong Youth Project, where our mission is to improve organized sport experiences for youth, parents, coaches, and other mentors via education and evidence-based practice. Welcome everyone to another Strong Youth Project interview. Again, I'm Matt Seeley. I'm a co-founder of the Strong Youth Project. Here with Justin Yee, another co-founder of the Strong Youth Project. We have Caitlin Heilner, who's a student at BYU University, Brigham Young University. She's helping with the Strong Youth Project. And our guest of honor today is Jenae Nelson, who's a brand new faculty at BYU. As of, you said this was day 2.
Yes, this is day 2.
Yeah, so when I say brand new,
yeah,
I mean brand new.
Yeah.
So thanks, Jenae, for coming
Thank you.
to talk to us today. Jenae is a developmental psychologist with an undergraduate degree in psychology from BYU and a PhD from BYU,
yes,
also in psychology.
Yes,
So,
yes, and I tricked them to get me back.
Yeah, well,
So.
you must have done a nice job the first 2 times here. In between your PhD, I noticed that you've done 2 postdoctoral experiences, one at Harvard
Correct.
Medical School
Yes.
and Massachusetts General, and then the second at Baylor,
Correct.
which I assume you're just finishing.
Yes, yeah. So they were actually both at the same time, and they were both remote.
Great.
So they're wrapping them up.
Fantastic. And can you tell us what exactly were you doing in your postdoctoral experiences?
Yeah, they were very different, but both of them really important to the work that I'm doing. So my work at Harvard has to do with neuroscience and spirituality and what spirituality looks like in the brain. So we also did work with compassion and mapping that in the brain as well. My work at Baylor had more to do with character and character development, intervention work, and application.
Great. I noticed on your bio, Jenae, that you're an expert in you tell me if I'm getting this right, transcendent
Yes.
indebtedness.
Yes, yeah. I'm the world expert because I'm the only one studying it.
You guys know what transcendent indebtedness is?
You'll have to give us your definition.
Do you know, Justin?
Kind of. We'll leave it. My views.
Do you mind telling us?
I will, yeah. So why there's the fancy word before it is because there are different types of indebtedness that you can experience. And typically when you talk about indebtedness, you think about I owe somebody, and a lot of times, especially in our culture, we think of that as a negative thing. So debt is bad. We typically want to avoid it. It's uncomfortable. So for example, somebody does something for you and that makes you feel like, oh, I got to quickly pay them back. Particularly if you don't have a great relationship with that person, they might even use that favor to maybe even hold something over you. So you want to hurry and pay it back so that you're not indebted anymore. So that type of indebtedness that we often think of is called transactional indebtedness. So that's more focused around ending relationships. So you don't want to stay in the relationship with somebody. You want to end the indebtedness as fast as possible. Transcendent indebtedness is usually something that you experience within loving relationships where you want the relationship to stay intact. You're okay with dependency and you're not in a hurry to pay off debt. So you're comfortable with the fact that this person has done something for you that you can never repay. So really a good example of that is indebtedness to God. And that is this idea that God has done so much for you. There's no possible way for you to repay it. But the transcendent version of that is that you're okay with that. You're like, I want to be indebted to God because I depend on him for everything I have, and I can't ever repay him. But what that does is it gives you this sense of I want to pay it forward, or I really want to make good on the gifts that God has given me. And so it generates this motivation to repay it, to be pro-social, but not in the way that you are with the transactional, where you want to pay it off, get out of the relationship, but just it's a token of your gratitude that you try to pay it forward.
It's a good thing.
It is a very, very good thing because it is an antidote to entitlement, which is the exact opposite of indebtedness. So entitlement is the world owes me or God owes me, right? Like I've done this and this and this. Now God needs to pay up. I've been keeping the commandments, being a good person. Now God needs to do this for me. But the transcendent indebtedness is this idea that I owe God. It's the complete opposite of that. So engendering this idea of indebtedness helps to fight off those feelings of entitlement that sometimes creeps in.
Fantastic. So the audience might be wondering, at the Strong Youth Project, our mission is obviously to improve the youth sport experience. Right? So don't worry, you're at the right place. Jenae, can you tell us how this might be related to youth sports?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a newcomer to the sphere of sports, and I'm really excited about it. I actually was a personal trainer prior to getting a PhD, so not new from that angle, but new from a researcher perspective. But I'm finding that as a developmental psychologist, that sports is a really important place for young people to develop character. And that's what I care about. I care about people developing character and for them to be pro-social, good people. And indebtedness is a part of that, in that it's one of those character traits that helps people to flourish. And we found that the indebtedness is associated with better well-being. It's associated with better relationships, more pro-social giving, which means you're more charitable and kind. And so this is something we want young people to develop. And in a recent study that we have, we even found that in college athletes, the sense of indebtedness actually explains the relationship between athletics and certain types of virtue development. So that's really neat that kind of sets the stage for that, this orientation of having a relationship with God such that you recognize that all your blessings are coming from him, and you can never quite repay him. And that stalls that entitlement, like I mentioned before. But sports is a place where these types of virtues have the potential, but not necessarily is it automatically happening, but they have the potential to develop.
Yeah, I noticed in that study, if I reviewed it a few days ago, so I'd love to some clarification if necessary, but the transcendent indebtedness, or even just the spirituality of the athlete, moderated the effect that the sport had on the athlete.
Exactly. So that
that correctly?
We had two separate studies. One was looking at like religion and spirituality more generally. So does that actually does that moderate the relationship between athletics and then virtue development? Because there was no main effect. So people just being in sports, just competing at the collegiate level was not predictive of virtue development, which was a surprise to me. But
can we define virtue development real quickly?
Absolutely.
So
yes.
And then I want to go right back to where we are.
Yes, we'll backtrack to that. So when I say virtue development, I'm glad that you asked this, because there's lots of different phrases and words that we kind of throw around that can sometimes mean the same thing or mean completely different things. So a lot of times people will say virtue, character, life skills, values, and these are all kinds of different pieces of the puzzle. But they're essentially, when I say virtue, I'm talking about character traits that lead to moral behavior. And that's very similar to the word character. So we can kind of use those interchangeably, but one has more of a background in Aristotelian ethics. Virtue does. And character is a term that we use quite often at BYU. And so that's the terminology I use in my lab, is character development. And then the development piece is, how does that particular character trait develop over time? So we're approaching it from a perspective that kind of like the growth perspective, to steal another psychological term there, that these things, you're not either born with or without, right? You're not just like born an honest person, but it's something that can develop or grow over time. And that's something that we can intervene on. So, and sports is a perfect place to be doing that, to intervene and to help to develop those character traits. And we assume that these character traits are helping people to live lives that are flourishing and good. So there's that caveat. So it's not just, they have the ability to find a job. That's a skill. That's an important life skill. Or they have the ability to, fill out an application, whatever. Those are skills, but we want things like resilience. We want courage. We want things that help you to navigate a more morally complex world.
Would you put those attributes, resilience, under virtue?
Yes, we would. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you're suggesting that sport can facilitate
Absolutely.
those attributes.
Not on its own.
Right.
Yes.
Right, not automatically, but it can facilitate those attributes, and indebtedness amplifies.
It's one of
the
them.
effect of
Yes, absolutely.
sport.
It does. Yes.
So we have a coach over here on our far left. You have any questions?
I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
I could hijack this.
Justin I love Justin because he talks practical.
So from a sport angle, so I mean, we had a good talk before the podcast on Saturday, and we talked for hours, maybe not hours, but it felt great. But the idea, like, so sports, so being in the sports realm, like, yes, a lot of parents say they want the character traits, but then where does it break down? I guess is the question. Like, where do we go wrong in sports?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because when I hear virtue and character, these are higher aims,
Mm-hmm.
right? These are above the sport, transcendent, right?
Yes.
It's like it's above everything. And so, where are we as a society in our focus on sports? How do we teach this, and how do we bring it back to youth sports to put these transcendent ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a growingly secular society.
Yeah, we do.
But I think regardless of that, I think people think about being trustworthy and grateful. Like, those are good attributes to have, regardless of
Right.
religious affiliation or anything. Like, those are things that, and I guess I came to mind, now I'm rambling and going on, but this idea of indebtedness, right? But then I think, this is where I'm not that clinical, right? But there's reciprocity. There's this
Mhm,
idea of
absolutely.
trade.
Mhm.
Back in early civilizations was community coming together. Like, I had something to offer, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where I guess we're hoping a lot of the Strong Youth Project brings these ideas back,
Mhm.
right, to the forefront of parents and athletes, of having things beyond Saturday's game
Yes.
as what we're trying to accomplish, right? Like, how do you
Yeah.
see your research and your, the knowledge that we're gaining and with these other groups that you've been talking with, like, what are some of the things that you would like to see or that we can do as coaches and parents to make sure that we build this resiliency when things come our way? We kind of discussed it, right? I see every week for an athlete or every game as like a microcosm of one's entire life.
Yes.
You start off,
Yep.
right? The other team may score on you quickly, so now you're behind,
Right.
right? Now you got to battle your way back, or vice
Right.
versa, and then you have to make moral choices
Yeah.
sometimes. Like, do I
Yeah.
foul somebody, and is that
Yeah.
appropriate, or is it just part of the rules of the game? And then how do I handle winning? Am I a good sport? Like, all these things, right?
Right.
But so often I feel like so many people now are chasing just the win,
Mm-hmm.
and the win at all costs,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that win at all costs has changed what that means. Like, I'm willing to sacrifice people, I'm willing to kind of cheat to accomplish,
Mhm.
versus I'm willing to put in all the hard work.
Right.
I'm willing
right.
to develop myself and my virtues so that I can win, versus maybe taking shortcuts. That's what I feel sometimes. I'm coming off of 2 weeks of tryouts in the club world, so I see, to me, I feel like there's a lot of negativity and uncertainty in parents trying to navigate their way through sports.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I feel like it's overwhelmingly negative,
Yeah.
because we're losing sight of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And your point is also reflected in the literature, in the scientific literature, in that there's researchers call this phenomenon that you're talking about moral bracketing. So when people are on the field, they're saying there are different rules here. So the moral rules in which I abide outside of sport are different. So I have this life here, my church life. This is why the joke of church basketball is such a thing, right? Like, they're moral bracketing. So they're coming here and they're saying there are different rules. They're different moral rules that I need to abide by. So this is why sport doesn't necessarily develop these virtues or character traits. In fact, there's mixed results. That means for some people, they're actually becoming less virtuous, having less character strengths over time by participating in sports, and mainly by this mechanism of moral bracketing.
So I have an idea there. And I was just talking to parents of 7 and 8 year old girls getting involved in club soccer, right? And I was trying to tell parents, or talking to parents about what they're saying on the sideline, and how maybe getting them into competitive sports, into soccer, is against everything they've taught them in the home.
Yeah.
Right? right?
Yeah.
Because usually with youth, we teach them how to share,
Mm-hmm.
right? We teach them how to be nice. We teach them to control their aggression. And the first thing you want to do on the soccer field is you want to steal the ball and you want to be really aggressive. It's like so counterintuitive, really.
Yeah.
I guess the moral bracketing would that kind of fall under that
absolutely.
of why kids get distressed by like, wait, what are you asking me to do now?
Right.
I don't understand this.
And moral bracketing isn't necessarily a bad thing in that you're saying in this context, this thing is okay. What happens is if you decide now to become more aggressive outside of the game, right? Or you become more competitive or more egocentric, more selfish off the field, when maybe in particular context those things would be appropriate. And this is where with virtue development, virtue theory, we say virtue requires knowing what to do. You have to do the right thing at the right time in the right place. And how do you know that? How do you learn that? You learn that through mentoring. You learn that through intentional learning and practice. So that means we can intervene on that. That means we can say, hey, it's okay to do that thing here. We don't do this here. It's okay that when we tell you to be aggressive or steal the ball, but know that when the game is over, you're lifting up your teammates, you're shaking the hands of your opponent, you're offering love and forgiveness and these other virtues that we care about, that is not associated with how the game went, right? So that's something that a very good coach or parent can be guiding the children through. But this isn't just happening. You can't just throw kids out on a field and expect them to come out and then they've learned all these moral lessons. They have to be taught these things.
So how does a parent, I'm a parent, can you give some actionables?
Yeah.
For how a parent can do this? It sounds hard to me.
I want to backtrack a little bit too, because my advice that I have is going to tie into what you said about the winning at all costs. So where sports goes awry is really what's the goal? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing sports? And when the answer is winning at all costs versus transcendent goals, and there's research and evidence, and one of them is the paper that we had that shows when you have transcendent goals, so that means something beyond the self. It doesn't have to be a defined religious orientation, but that helps. But it can be purpose, like I want to make the world a better place. I want to use the talents that God gave me, just something outside of you. When that is the goal, that you have these transcendent goals, then you're going to be more likely to develop these character traits. So as a parent, you want to make sure that you're rewarding the right things. So if you're saying, I'm going to give you $20, this is a true story. There was a girl on one of my daughter's soccer teams whose friend would get $20 for every goal she scored. That's their incentive. Parents are incentivizing the wrong thing. How about I give you $20 for every person that you help? Every time you share the ball or whatever,
5 passes equals the goal, right?
Right. I mean,
that's the goal.
Right. We need to be as parents, we need to be incentivizing this virtuous behavior that we want to be building up and repeating. We don't want to be incentivizing winning, because we're saying that at the end of the day, that's the thing we care about the most. And the athletes that have that orientation are the ones that suffer the most psychologically.
Would Michael Phelps be a good case study on that?
Absolutely.
Could you describe maybe some of that?
I
know I'm throwing that on the spot. But Michael Phelps, he's the most decorated Olympian athlete.
Yeah, and he had a major meltdown.
Major struggles.
And he's one of many, right? He's just a case example, but there are so many athletes. And the research shows overall, the more competitive the sport gets, the worse this is. But the performance goals is what they're called. These performance goals are the most unhealthy to have. So it's not that you can't have excellence as a goal, but what is the transcendent purpose? You have to have the performance has to be anchored in this transcendent purpose. That's the thing that is going to elevate the game, and it's going to help you to be able to, once the game is over, you can walk away from that because your purpose is still intact, no matter what the outcome is, and whether you win or lose, you still have your purpose, right?
Can you give us some more examples? I'm over here. I'm still thinking like a parent now, and let's keep it in soccer here, if we can, or you can take it away from soccer if you don't like soccer. But What are some other examples of transcendent goals? Like, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my brain around this idea.
Yeah, so I mean, this is going to be very specific to individual belief systems, right? But like I said, transcendent purpose can be quite broad. It can be that, you know, you want to make the world a better place. It can also be that you get some kind of intrinsic joy out of exercise. We want all of our kids to just enjoy it. That's a goal in of itself too, right? Not necessarily transcendent, but it's definitely not as harmful as I have to win.
How about
right?
hard work?
Yeah.
Is that a transcendent goal?
I think so. Absolutely. That's something that's more of a character trait that you're trying to imbue, right? That you have this work ethic. But you could all, like, I think for my daughters, so from my religious background, I say, God gave you this amazing talent and you get to go out there and you get to magnify these talents that you've been given. Isn't that cool? And my son is a runner, and I'm like, God made you fast. Isn't that cool? And doesn't that remind you of Chariots of Fire? But it's like this. It's a totally different way of competing. It's this: when I compete, I'm doing it for my team. The team is a transcendent type of a goal.
So teamwork.
Teamwork.
Hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Honesty.
Yeah, I mean, anything that is not winning, right? That's a positive pro-social goal is going to be transcendent in that way.
Hard topic. No, because what I mean by that, I think sports. I'll use track and field. I know we're jumping sports here, but I mean, recently you had some track meets here at BYU for high school athletes, and it was actually really fun to sit in the stands. And I mean, we're just celebrating all these accomplishments of kids breaking state records. I mean, there was a young lady that smashed the 2-mile state record, and the buzz that created in the stands, right? There was no sense of, oh, she's on a different team, and so I need to root against her and this and that. And people were just literally in awe. Like, wow, look at what they did. And my daughter does pole vault, and we're sitting with some other people, and people start talking about, oh, who's your kid, what event? And all of a sudden, people I've never met are like, they're rooting for my daughter to do well. Like, it was just neat, right? We don't see that in team sports, because now all of a sudden, like, I have to root against the other team, which is kind of fun sometimes. Don't get me wrong. Like, I like to root against that, or root against adults maybe. Mm-hmm. But we were sharing this story the other day where even one of our teams in our club came back, and they were losing, and they came back and scored in the final minutes, and the sideline erupted like it's some big great accomplishment. And I remember seeing a face of a little kid on the other team, and he looked crushed. Not because they lost, but he was looking at our sideline, and there was adults cheering against him. It's kind of the look on his face. And I was thinking, what a contrast to a track and field event, right? Where we're cheering major accomplishments, but we're also cheering the last place person. They're giving their best effort, you know. And then to that seems more of the effort side, and we're celebrating the athlete trying versus whether they won or lost.
Exactly.
Or our side.
And I want to clarify that, like, being the best version of yourself is a good goal. Excellence is a good goal. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing, but it's when your self-worth becomes contingent upon winning. So I'm a bad person if I lose. That's where it becomes problematic. So you want their self-worth to be anchored in those transcendent, whether it's I'm a child of God, or, you know, whatever the transcendent self-worth is, that's going to be the most important thing for you to focus on. That, hey, this is why I say to my kids, it doesn't matter how you do out there. Like, you're enjoying yourself, you're having fun, you're building a talent, and you know this is a form of praise that you get to go out and show God what you can do. What a cool thing! And so it doesn't really matter. Like, you just go after your personal PR, and that self-improvement is a fantastic goal. But even if you don't get that PR, even if you don't win, I'm gonna love you the same. God's gonna love you the same. You're gonna have the same purpose and in life than if you don't win. Because that's really when you have self-worth contingent upon performance, that's what is the most unhealthy, and we don't want that for our kids.
Yeah, I kind of like this. I'm seeing, winning is often outside of our control. But some of these goals you're talking about, they all seem to be more within our control. Do you agree with that?
I like that distinction. That's very nice. Yes, I absolutely agree. Mm-hmm.
Something that comes to my mind, I was watching Utah Valley Marathon on Saturday, and it's just such a fun environment to be with because everyone's out there holding posters for everyone, and they're just happy to be there. And I was reading a book afterwards, kind of talking about like what happens if you have a bad race, like how do you go about not making it ruin your day? And there's just so many other ways I feel like in a marathon situation and a lot of sports in general of like, look at the experience, look at how you grew. Don't look at the race or the meet or the game. Like look at the practice, look at the experiences that you've made with friends and like the fun times and memories that you had leading up to that, where I think that it's such a good focus where for coaches even, like how do you feel like coaches can be like, look at all these other things, not the win-lose situation.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about just back to the indebtedness piece there that engenders so much gratitude. So this idea, one of the things I tell my son, and he's a runner for Salt Lake Community College, he runs collegiately. I tell him like, just be so grateful that you're here. You didn't have to be here. You're here, you're running in college, and it's so special that you have this opportunity. Be grateful for it. Show God that you're grateful. So go out there and do a good job for God. This is within my religious perspective, but you can have other purposes, right? That are transcendent, like, and you can still be grateful for opportunities that you weren't necessarily entitled to, right? That we want to get rid of this entitlement. We're entitled to win. We're entitled to be on the best team. We're entitled to the best coach. Who says that? That's not, that's never part of a guarantee of life. So anything that you get to do like this, especially when you start getting on the really competitive level, is such a privilege. And so I think that as parents, we have that opportunity to tell our kids this, to remind them, not in a shame way. We're not going to get them on a guilt trip, but we want to be like, this is pretty amazing that you're doing this. Yeah. And I think that engenders the gratitude in ourselves too, to kind of reorient us as parents. Like, this is pretty cool that we can do this. And even like the younger kids that are on like the comp soccer leagues or whatever, it's like, isn't it so fun? You get to do this on a Saturday morning. Look how beautiful it is. It's like Utah's like the prettiest place in the world to live. It's so beautiful, and you're out here playing soccer. How awesome! Like these little things that you do completely set the mood and can change it. Versus, okay, now we're gonna go in there and here's our game plan, here's our strategy. Like if they're getting that from you as the parent on the way to the game. Versus what a beautiful day it is. You don't have to be Pollyanna, but.
So
you change the way that they go into the game.
I totally agree, but I want to acknowledge this is a really easy trap to fall into.
Sure.
Our society, to me, seems hyper-focused on competition and winning. And I've been guilty, even since the inception of the Strong Youth Project, I've found myself on the sideline yelling at an official or yelling at a youth athlete. And so this is, it's one thing to sit here recording a podcast and talk about it, but I think it's an entirely different thing.
I would be lying if I said that I've been perfect modeling it as a parent. We were talking earlier about how I wish I knew some of this research before my kids are all grown and through. My youngest is 14 at this stage, and I'm like, I made a lot of mistakes when they were in sports and when they were younger, and I did push them. And it comes from a good place though. So I want to get rid of some of the parent guilt that we might be feeling as we're hearing this. Like, it does come from this. We have this desire as parents for our kids to be the best version of themselves. We really, really want that. But we kind of conflate this idea that they have to be these high-performing athletes with being a good person and being their best selves. Maybe your kid isn't going to get a Division I scholarship. And like you said, the stats aren't in your favor for that anyways. But maybe they're just going to be like an average, mediocre athlete. But they're going to enjoy it, and it's going to bless their life forever because now they have this sport that they can do for the rest of their life for the most part. Some sports you can't do forever, but, so I think that as parents, that drive and that push for your kids is coming from the good place. So if we can just say, okay, but that isn't going to help them become their best selves. So let's reframe this then, because if pushing them to perform is actually going to make them worse, and we know it will, the research says that psychologically they will have more anxiety, depression, and whatnot if their goals are all performance based. But if we can say, I want you to be the best version of yourself, because I want you to be happy, and I want you to have a sport that makes you healthy, and I want you to feel accomplished, and I want you to have something that you feel capable of doing. But really, you don't have to win in order for those things to happen.
Yeah. How easy is it?
No,
Go ahead,
so,
Justin.
no, I'm going to ask you. I think Jenae's. I already got this kind of answer from her on Saturday as far as her being gravitated towards the Strong Youth Project and how these things are really important. And she wants to be involved in the project, right? To get this messaging out, because it's that old saying that we grew up with, like, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose; it's how you play the game, right? It's like, can we get back to that, and how you play the game? And then there's memes on there. It's like, oh, that's what losers say. It's like, yeah, right. And this kind of goes into hopefully some of the things that the messaging that I'm trying to get out is, if I'm working with say a boys team, right? I tell these parents, like, I want them to be good young men, right? And my joke is with 3 daughters, right? I want them to be dateable, and I want them to be a good husband someday and a professional in their work environment, where when things get tough, they're not going to run away or think they're entitled to something, right? They're going to stay the course, right? They're going to take on that responsibility, and they're not going to run away from their family. Like, that's why I coach young boys, right? Is because we need more good people in the world that are going to take care of our daughters. And that, I know that can get us some slack, right? Because nowadays it's like, oh, women don't need men, right? Like, but no, we do need each other. We know that, right? And we need families to have that unit. And I think even if you go to secular route, I've never had anybody push back on that.
Yeah.
Say, nah, I want them to learn how to steal from people and win at all costs and just do whatever it takes and sacrifice everybody in his way, right? Like, those aren't there, and it's not real. And yet, but we kind of live it every Friday or Saturday during games. We see that part come out, right? I mean, I almost got kicked out of my daughter's lacrosse game the other day. So, like, yeah, so I still have that problem, right?
Precisely why sports are such a great laboratory and such a great place to develop these things, because it does require you to stretch. So you have all these really amazing moments, like after a loss, you get to teach your kids how to handle failure. This is awesome. This is transferable. This is a skill you want them to be able to have throughout their whole life. They can handle failure without having a complete emotional meltdown. So they get emotional regulation skills from this, because we're saying, hey, it's all right. It's disappointing. We validate the emotion. It's okay that you're disappointed, but let's think about all the things that happened during that game. This was a really good thing that happened, and this was really positive, or we learned something from that. So next time we're going to come back and we're going to be better. Whatever it is, we have this moment afterwards, the drive home with our kids, where we can either tell them all the things that they did wrong, or we can talk about, what did we learn from this, so that they can start to self-regulate, because failure is going to happen no matter where you are. Even if you're used to winning. Solve,
right? Conflict resolution.
Yeah, even if you're Michael Phelps and you're like, you are a gold medalist, like, there comes a certain point when those things don't matter, because you never learned how to self-regulate. You never learned how to deal with failure. And you never really learned this transcendent purpose for what you're doing. That's why when he got the gold medals, he's like, it didn't mean anything to me, because he had it was all about the winning. It was never about this transcendent purpose until, later. But I think that's if the winning is always the goal, then you're never going to even feel good when you do win. That's why it's this crazy.
It's a trap.
Yeah, it's a trap. It's a trap, because it's the worst goal that you can have, because it's elusive. It's not something that will actually bring happiness into your life. But anyways, as a parent, and when you're dealing with these hard situations where you have the temptation or the tendency to get into the competitive mode, but again, it's coming from a place of goodness as a parent. I want my kid to be good. I want them to be the best version of themselves. Realize the very best thing you can do for them in that moment is to teach them how to handle failure, is to teach them that they have a transcendent purpose, something beyond the self, and to be grateful that they have the experience and that they can learn. There's many other virtues or character strengths that we can talk about that are perfectly cultivated in sports, but all of these things that I'm talking about are happening on an attentional level. They're not just imbued by the fact that you've enrolled your kids in this sport club.
So that was something you said to me on the phone the other day that caught my attention, is it doesn't happen automatically. So, right? So there's lots of good things that can happen, but there's no guarantee. So as a parent, and I assume this starts with the coach. Justin, you can comment on this if you want, or Jenae, but as a parent who wants my children to grow up with character, what do I do? I'm looking for a soccer coach. Do you have any advice on how I make that decision?
Yeah. So
I know this is maybe outside your expertise, but
it's a really important question, and then maybe Justin can jump in too. So
by the way, I think I'm an ever skeptical person. This is in a system that is, I think the deck is stacked against us.
I do too.
So,
but one of the studies that I did show that this is controlling for all different kinds of programs, because the study that we had was across several different colleges, and I think there was a total of like 400 collegiate athletes out of this like 1,200 college sample. And we looked at their experiences. They're all having different experiences, different coaches. They're at different universities, so kind of controlling for those different. They're having different parents, but if they were religious, the more religious they were, the more character strengths that they had, right? So that was what we kind of talked about that already. So that gives me a little bit of hope that there's a sense of, if my kid has some kind of meaning-making system, that's another thing that we found, some kind of meaning-making system, some kind of higher purpose, whatever that looks like, then that can kind of cover some of the things that are less ideal things that are happening in sport, right? But if you can, if you want to guarantee that they're going to have an even better experience, then absolutely you're going to want to care about how you're interacting with your kids. What is my goal for this sport? Is it performance, or is it some other kind of transcendent goal? And you're going to want to find a coach who's like-minded, that is going to care about the development of the whole child, not just winning or losing. And then you're going to want a program that also supports those goals. So I talked about this on the phone with Justin, but my son chose to run at Salt Lake Community College, even though he had other D1 offers, because of the coach and because of the program. And I think that speaks really highly of Isaac Wood, is the coach there. And that was a decision he made. But, other people will be like, why would you turn down a D1 running offer? But it was because he had the sense that he wanted to be in a community and on a team that had similar goals and that were supportive of his development. So those are all things that I think that you can consider. But as a parent, if you have less control over the coach, like for example, you're in public school and it's just whoever is the cross country coach or whatever, then there's a lot that you can do in the home in helping your child to navigate some of the moral dilemmas that they're going to encounter in their life, and turn some of those bad sport experiences into good. So you can say, yeah, that was really discouraging when the coach said that to you, right? But remember why you're doing this, So there's a lot of opportunities for you to intervene with your kids as they're talking to you, even about the bad experiences that they've had. That's a moment of a touch point where you can come in and have some of those conversations.
Fantastic.
Maybe to help answer that question as well, is like, where does it start? It actually starts with parents, right? I mean, you have to kind of decide and reflect, right, of what do I want for my child? Like, why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we putting our kids in sport, right? And if it is mainly for the character, you might need to look against what's mainstream right now, which a lot of the clubs and the sports have put so much emphasis on competition, right, that might not be the environment we need to do. And then we need to look at how can we be involved in that? Don't outsource it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just assume because I put my kids in sports that they're going to learn how to work hard, that they're going to learn how to be resilient, that they're going to learn any of that. Because depending on the coach and other parents, that could be a disastrous situation, right? So I think it's a complicated answer, but you have to kind of look at, I think what you're saying, Jenae, you have to look at the coach, you have to look at the other parents, and then you got to be willing to be part of the solution. You can't sit back and outsource it, right? You got to be willing to, and maybe this is the hard part, but I think this is, in some ways, I'm trying to do this in micro doses, right? Of having parents self-reflect on what are they trying to accomplish, and have honest conversations of what are we doing, right? Or what are we getting caught up in? Are we getting caught up in Friday night dinner parties and we want to be able to brag about where our kids are, where they're playing and what team they're on and what they're accomplishing and how many goals they score, right? Even though a sport like soccer, once you get older, right, there's 11 players on the field. And the average team scores just over one goal, right? And there's 11 players on the field, another 15 on the bench. So out of 16 players, maybe one scores, but everybody wants to know who scored, right? It's like, to your point, that what we're emphasizing or focusing on is so misguided, right? And maybe take a step back and look at, what are we doing here, and what are the best practices going forward so that they can be successful. And
Yeah, one thing I really enjoyed about my kids, several of my kids were, actually all of them now, were in the American cross country program at the high school. And one of the things that I really enjoy is they have this caveman award when they're doing their award ceremony. So you have like your MVP and the most improved, all these other awards, but then there's this caveman award. And it's essentially like a person of character, the person who was, the most encouraging and was just a team player, whatever. And it's such an honor to get this caveman award. And I think this is a really good example of incentivizing the right things, because you will, the behaviors that you incentivize oftentimes are the ones that can continue to develop and that you cultivate. And so on teams, think about that when you're giving out awards. Do you have something like that? And are we thinking about, do we care about empathy and compassion and encouragement? Like, do we care about these things, and are we incentivizing them?
Fantastic. That gives me hope.
Yes.
And it gives me some ideas as well, because I often, our society right now is so competitive, and we're really interested in comparisons, I feel. So I sometimes feel like we're swimming upstream. They're preaching these things. I suppose we are, but there's no reason not to do it.
But there's a lot of people. Sport, it does cultivate good people. There's so many people's lives that have been changed through sport, and there are a lot of people that are doing it right. So it's learning from the people who are doing it right, learning from the people that have high moral character. And there are a lot of them. So we can get discouraged quite easily, because the default in sport is that if you do nothing to intervene on character, unless you're highly religious, you're going to become less virtuous over time. That's sad. That's a very sad statistic, that you're going to become less virtuous over time in sport unless you're highly religious. That kind of anchors you, right? But there's people who are doing it right, that are coming out, they're moral exemplars, they're fantastic human beings. And that tells me that sport can become an actually incredible place to grow character if we are allowing it to, and we're intentional about it.
Fantastic. My dad used to say, sport doesn't build a character, it builds characters.
That's great.
Yeah.
So,
that's great.
But
I might have to change that saying a little bit, but yeah.
I'm glad to hear that it's not required. So it's not a done deal. So, and I really believe that. I've seen so much benefit in my own personal life from sport. I've seen fantastic coaches in the lives of my children. They've helped. And my wife and I have, at the end of the day, when we're picking environments for our children to participate in sport, we look at the coach first and foremost. So
this is another. I actually didn't send this to you, but this is another paper that is currently we're currently working on. But we found that when you look at college students and their social networks, and this social networks can include teachers, it can include jobs, it can include religious leaders, friends, like there's, basically any type of social influence in the lives of a college student. We found that when you put them all in a regression formula, that coaches, so if you had a coach, you were going to have higher moral behavior and less psychological problems like depression and anxiety, having a good coach.
Can you define coach?
Yeah, it's so that for these folks it was for the intercollegiate sports. So these would be the athletes. But that's basically like the actual measure was a yes or no, do you have a coach? That's all that it was. And that simply was predictive of these things, which is really cool. So it's not yes or no, do you participate in sports, but the having the good coach is making a difference in the moral development of college students. So I think you're exactly right on that. That is it was predictive above and beyond religious leaders and teachers, like good professors. We think we're going to make such a difference, but like coaches are having this massive impact on shaping these lives. And so I think that that's something to think about. And but going back to that, we don't always have control of that. But as parents, there is a point of intervention where we can start to develop those things as well. But if you have any type of control over who your kid's coach is, pick somebody who is aligned with your values.
Fantastic. Well, we could talk for a lot longer. I think we've taken enough time for today. But thanks so much for coming. Caitlin, Justin, you have any last questions or comments?
I just to wrap it up, we love sports. And I think the reason why we sit here is because of everything we just said. Sports is one of the best avenues to help shape character because of the competition, the adversity that we create in those environments. And let's use sport for that, right? To create those environments that allows our kids to grow and learn from mistakes and triumphs, right? Treat those two imposters both the same, right? As the poem goes. But it's looking at what are we learning from those micro life experiences, right? And really let's take back sports in many ways and make sure that we're developing kids in the right way, because I believe it's the best format to develop character, right? Is through sports. And so I think Jenae probably believes the same when she's starting to dedicate her new lab and her studies towards, character in sports, right? It's a great place to do it.
Great. So, Jenae, any parting words? We'll give you the final word.
Yeah, I hope the main takeaway is that just enrolling your kids in sports isn't enough to develop character, but it can actually be so critical and become a catalyst for character building if the right ingredients are there. And so educating yourself and evaluating as a parent, if I'm speaking to parents or athletes, evaluating why are we doing this? Think about that often and think, do I have some kind of higher purpose? Is there something that, that is guiding me beyond just the performance or winning? And know that intentional development and practice is going to bring more happiness in your life than the winning, even though we think it's the other way around. But it's a goal that you shouldn't chase, because it won't actually create happiness. It will create more issues down the road. So we want to focus on those other things that matter more, and we care about the whole person. We care about the development of the whole person. And sometimes that also means ceasing certain athletic activities or switching. That's another thing that is important to keep in mind, that sometimes flexibility versus persistence is a virtue. And I think that can kind of, be a little bit startling sometimes, but it's important to understand that if you put the individual's development at the center of everything versus their performance, that you are mostly concerned about them becoming a good and happy individual, then some of the decisions you make will become a little bit more clear than if you're only focused on the performance and the achievement. And so that would be my takeaway for everyone, is find a good reason for doing sports, and you will become a better person. It is an absolutely incredible way to grow as an individual, to participate in sport and with a good coach. There's not quite anything like it.
Yeah. On the bottom line of our Strong Youth Project mission and aims document, we state that young people who have positive sport experiences are more likely to become physically fit, emotionally resilient, and mentally stable. And I firmly believe that. That's why we're here. That's the end game for us. So I'm glad to hear that it's possible and highly likely if we do certain things. Mm-hmm. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Caitlin. And that's a wrap.